Today we enjoying outdoors, we're hiking somewhere in the woods where I have no idea where we are. But I figured this would be a great opportunity to talk about text messages. Now, we all see how text messages making their way more and more into e-discovery, whether it's from people's personal phones or from a corporate chat systems like Slack and Teams. They present certain challenges for collection, review, as well as production. So I figured today, why don't we talk about some of those challenges. Now, of course, the first problem we have is collecting this data. Different companies like Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, they have ways of exporting chat messages out. And I believe there's actually a law that people have to be able to get their data out. However, there is no law that makes those exports consistent or even useful. Some exports will be in a JSON format, some will be XML, some could be HTML, all kinds of ways. And some exports are genuinely not useful. So for example, if you take Instagram data to see who liked something, all you get is just a list of dates when someone liked something. So that's absolutely not useful. Okay, so let's say you got your data exported. Now you got your JSON files, XML files. You could open them in a text editor and see what's in there, but of course that's not going to work for you because it's not reasonable to review data like that. So what you're going to need is either platform that support ingestion of these file types, or you'll need a conversion software. Conversion software that would take your JSON or XML files and turn them into a DAT file, or like an RSMF file for relativity, or something that's going to be useful to whatever system you're using. So now that you figured out your conversion and you're able to get text messages into a readable format like a DAT file or RSMF, the problem you're going to have next is working with them. And you'll quickly understand that each text message doesn't represent a complete piece of communication like email would. Just by looking at one text message, you don't know what's going on in this particular conversation. You have to read messages before and after. So multiple text messages combined creates some kind of meaningful piece of content or a document. And because of that, if you're working with a DAT file and you're doing searches, just because you have a search hit on particular text message, you can't just mark that responsive or pull it out for review or do something like that. You'll need to bring in context around that message. So you may need to bring certain number of messages before and certain number of messages after, or you need to bring in all the messages from the same day. And only then you'll be able to perform meaningful review. Another problem you may have with text messages are attachments. Sometimes attachments are being downloaded when you extract them from whatever software, and sometimes those attachments could be hyperlinks to files that reside somewhere on the server. So you need to make sure that the attachments are downloaded and saved in your review environment, because if you're going to rely on hyperlinks to go and look at those attachments at the time of review, you may have more issues with that. First of all, you need internet access, you'll need to go somewhere, but also you're not really collecting and preserving all the data. So whatever method you're going to use for collecting and preserving your data, you want to make sure attachments are downloaded and make it into the review so everything's preserved. And this way, if something gets deleted on the server at some point, it doesn't affect your review if the review has to run for a long time, for example. So attachments is the other thing to watch out for. Now, the other interesting problem you may have is text messages. If you just read them one at a time, they may not mean what the conversation was about. So I'm sure you've seen that, where you have multiple people texting back each other, and someone asks a question and somebody posts something else, and the other person replies yes, and then they meant to reply yes to the previous message, not the one after. And sometimes like order of messages gets jumbled up a bit. So sometimes it's hard to figure out who was replying to what, and the messages sort of get jumbled out of order. Now, the other issue you may encounter is when text messages go in addition to another conversation, which I'm sure we can kind of realize that sometimes people send an email to somebody, no reply, person texts me, hey, did you get started on that project? Yes or no. So you need to know what the text message was sent in regards to. But sometimes it gets even crazier. So I'll give you an example of me and my wife's communications. So let's say I go to a store and I tell her like, hey, do you need me to pick up anything while I'm at the store? And she's like, oh, if I remember, I'll text you. And so I go to the store, and while I'm at the store, I get a text message that says chicken. I'm like, okay. So I get chicken, you know, come back to whatever. And then later on, maybe we decide to go out with kids to a park or something. And so while they're getting ready, maybe I get the car and I wait for them to come down. I live in an apartment building, so I wait for them to come down, and I'm sitting at the fire hydrant waiting for them. And so my next text message to my wife would be, by the hydrant on the left. Right, so that means I'm sitting at the, exit the building, go to the left, that's the fire hydrant, I'm waiting in the car for them. Now, if somebody were to read those text messages, they thought we would had some kind of mental problems, right? If one person says chicken, the other one says by the hydrant on the left, it wouldn't really make any sense. So these text messages go together with a conversation we were having or something else. So in that case, it's going to be really hard to decipher what the hell is going on. All right, so the last thing we got to talk about is production considerations. And one of the things people like to do when they clump messages together for conversation, they like to take like a whole Slack channel and try to jam it into one big RSMF file, because it makes it pretty awesome to review. All you do is you kind of drag down the slider bar on the right, you read the messages and you're like, no, not interesting, not interesting. Okay, here's the interesting part, right? So problem it causes is when you're going to go to produce this. If your conversation is too large, whether that's RSMF or HTML or some other way, when you image it, you're going to get hundreds and hundreds of pages of text messages. And if you don't want to produce some of them, you'll have to redact what you don't want to produce. And well, no one likes redacting. So one thing I recommend doing is dividing messages into manageable size chunks in anticipation that you're going to be producing them. Manageable size chunks to me is usually 24 hours, right? So each day's worth of conversations, you put a separate message or conversation or document that you're going to image. And now if there are some messages that are irrelevant from that day, it's going to be fairly easy to redact once that file is imaged. All right, so what's the bottom line here? Well, text messages are here to stay. If anything, we're going to get more and more of them, and we have to learn to deal with them. We're going to have better and better tools to collect and extract them, process them, and ultimately we have to embrace them. They are here, and we have to deal with them. And the quicker we learn how to deal with them, the better our lives are going to be. So, any other problems I missed that you may encounter with text message collection, review, or production, please let me know in the comment section below. Don't forget to follow on LinkedIn, subscribe on YouTube, and I will see you next time.